Hey everyone, welcome to episode 12 of the Blender Story from Zero to Andy's Room series. Before we dive in, please make sure you've watched the earlier episodes. The techniques in this part are a bit more advanced, so watching those will help you understand this one much better. First off, I want to apologize for the delay. Unfortunately, I had a nasty cold and couldn't record a new episode sooner, but I just couldn't wait any longer to get this out to you. So if my voice sounds a little rough, please bear with me. In this episode, we're going to model this dresser. Before starting the modeling, we first need to get familiar with more features in the user interface. I know it might seem a bit late. In a lot of courses, this is covered in the very first episode, but in my opinion, for someone who's brand new to the software, going over the entire user interface at the start doesn't help much. That's why I prefer to introduce it in this episode, right when your mind is ready to take in more. Now, what you need to know about the user interface is how to customize the viewport and the panels. In Blender, if you haven't done this yet, it might feel a bit tricky, so please pay close attention. Every panel in Blender and in any software really has 4 corners, right? Anytime you move your mouse to any of these corners, the icon changes to a target icon. For example, if I move my mouse to this corner and hold down the left click, since there's no window on the left, no matter how much I try to drag to the left, nothing will happen. The same goes for dragging upward. Since there's no window up there, nothing happens. So here I have 2 options. If I hold down the left click and drag to the right, the viewport splits vertically. Okay, I'm going to right click to cancel that. Now, if I drag down, you're going to see the viewport splits horizontally this time. I'm going to right click to cancel that too. Now, once more, I'm going to click here and drag to the right, so the viewport splits vertically. Now, here things are a bit different. I'm going to adjust the camera a little in this viewport to make the difference between these 2 viewports more noticeable. Okay, now imagine we want to close the left viewport and just keep the right one. To do this, bring your mouse over to the corner of the viewport you want to keep. Notice my mouse is on the top left corner of the right viewport. So the right viewport is the viewport that I want to keep. Now hold down the left click and move your mouse slightly to the left. And because there is a window to the left, something like this happens. The right viewport has a brighter highlight, meaning that's the viewport that will stay. And the left viewport has a dimmer highlight, meaning that viewport will close. The mouse icon even changes to an arrow pointing left, right? Now, if I release the mouse click, you're going to see that the left viewport closes and the right one takes its place. If I want to do the opposite of what we just did, I'd bring my mouse to the corner of this left viewport, hold down the left click, and drag it to the right this time. Okay, now pay attention here. If I bring my mouse to this corner and drag it to the right, you're going to see that since there is no window on this side, the viewport splits vertically again. And now we have 3 viewports. I highly recommend you open up a Blender scene and try this out right now so the logic clicks and you get comfortable with it. If you don't really like this method, there is another way to do it. Just move your mouse to the border between the windows and right click. The options here are pretty clear about what they do. For example, if you choose swap areas, instead of closing the windows, it just swap them. Alternatively, you can also hold down Ctrl, then left click and drag on the window you want to swap. Okay? If you pick Join Area, you can move your mouse left or right to join the window. Pay attention to the highlighted window again, okay? Horizontal split and vertical split are pretty straightforward too, so I suggest you try those out on your own. Okay? One last tip. If you hold down the Shift key and click on the corner of the window you want and move your mouse in any direction, you're going to see that it duplicates the window, making a floating version you can move, for example, to a second monitor to work with. Okay? You can also do these things with other panels too, and that's where knowing the names of each panel and recognizing their icons really helps. For example, if I drag the Properties window over this one, it closes that window. Now, if I want to bring it back, I'm going to click here and drag down. Now, who remembered the name of the panel that closed? If you said Outliner, you get it. So I'm going to click on this icon, and here's a list of all the panels names and icons in Blender. Okay, I'm going to select Outliner here, and just like that, the outliner comes back. Simple as that. Okay, if you want to resize a window, just bring your mouse to the middle of the border between 2 windows and adjust the size that way. Okay, now if you click any of these tabs up here, you're going to see there are actually preset workspaces with different layouts and panel arrangements designed to make it easier for users to access tools for specific tasks. For example, the animation workspace is set up so animators have easy access to their tools. But for now, we're not using these workspaces. So let's go back to the layout workspace, which is Blender's default, to start our work. Now, why did I bring this up in this episode? Let's start modeling so you'll see why. As always, don't forget you can click the link in the description to download the practice files for free from our pages on ArtStation and Gumroad. This way you can follow along and work on the project with me. Okay, now I'm gonna add a cube. Press 1 on the numpad to go to the front view. Activate X-ray with Alt-Z. Select these vertices, move them up. Press S to scale them. Just make sure when you're scaling, you're not selecting any axis. Next, I'm gonna select the bottom vertices, bring them down, and scale them slightly again without selecting any axis. Now I'm pressing 3 on the numpad to go to the right view. I'm going to select these top vertices, press S again, and scale them down slightly without selecting any axis. I'm going to select these vertices and move them slightly to the side. Now if I go back to the front view, you're going to see the vertices position has changed and doesn't match our reference anymore. And if I adjust their position in the front view by scaling, the vertices position will change again in the right view. If we keep going like this, it's like we're running in circles. This is where having a second viewport and seeing our model in perspective view at the same time can really help. So I'm going to click here and drag my mouse to the side to split the viewport in two. Okay, I'm going to middle click and drag to switch this viewport to perspective view and press Alt-Z to exit X-ray mode. I'm going to press T in this viewport to close the toolbar and make it a bit cleaner. Now let's see what the issue was. Let me make this viewport a little bigger. Okay. If I scale these vertices in the front view without selecting an axis, the scale happens uniformly, which you can clearly see in the perspective viewport. But our object width in the front view is wider than its side view. So this means we need to scale it non-uniformly. That's why in situation like this, we need to specify an axis after activating scale. So in the front view, after pressing S, I'm going to press X so the scale only happens along the X-axis. You can already see the difference in the perspective view, right? Now, if I switch back to the right view, you're going to see that the vertices stay in place and didn't move. Now, both the right and front views match the reference exactly. So keep this in mind. Now, I'm going to go to the right view. Select these bottom vertices, press S and then Y to constrain the scale along the Y-axis and adjusting the vertices position to match the reference. I'm going to select these vertices and move them slightly to the side. Now, if you check the front view, you're going to see everything is in place. Okay? Next, I'm going to add an edge loop in the center here. I'm going to press S and then X and just make sure you specify the axis when you're scaling, okay? I'm going to add another edge loop up here and scale it up a bit along the X-axis. I'm going to repeat the same for the bottom section. Now back in the right view, I'm going to select these, press S, activate the Y-axis, and adjust the scale. Alright, I'm going to repeat this for the other edge loops as well. And you can see that, just like that, the basic shape of the model is coming together. Now I'm going to add an edge loop here in the center, and another one here. I'm going to add a bevel modifier. Change the segment to 2, hold Shift, click and drag to reduce the amount, right-click, and enable Shade Smooth. I'm going to also add a subdivision surface modifier and change the viewport levels to 2. And there we go. Let's move on to the top section. I'm going to switch to the front view, add a cube, and move it up. Pressing Tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to move these vertices down and bring these ones up. I'm going to select everything with A, press S, then X, and scale them out a bit. Now selecting the top vertices, I'm going to press S and X again to adjust the scale. In the right view, I'm going to select everything, press S and then Y, and scale down like this. I'm going to move these vertices to the right. Now I'm going to select these top vertices again, press S and Y, and scale them down a bit. Just make sure to check the front view to make sure everything is fine. Alright, now I'm going to add an edge loop in the middle. And since this curve is consistent on all 4 sides, I'm going to press S and scale it without selecting an axis to make this curve uniform. Okay, everything looks good in the right view too. Now make sure this object is selected first, then select the other object, press Ctrl L, and choose Copy Modifiers to copy the same modifiers as the previous object. And that's done. Lastly, we're going to enable Shade Smooth for it. Alright, if I zoom in here, You're going to notice some issues here because there aren't enough edge loops. The subdivision surface modifier is trying to smooth this area, so I'm going to add an edge loop near this section. Just make sure to place it close to the edge and don't attach it directly. Okay, I'm going to add an edge loop near this part on the other object as well, which will make the edge sharper. Okay, I'm going to check in perspective view to make sure everything looks fine. Alright, everything seems good. Now I'm going to add another edge loop to the bottom of this object to make the bottom edge sharper. Alright, that's done with this section. Okay, let's start modeling the bottom part of this dresser. I'm going to add a cube and move it down here. I'm going to move these vertices down and bring these ones up. I'm going to scale them out on the x-axis a bit, select them again, and scale them down on the x-axis. Alright, switching to the right view, I'm going to press the period key on the numpad to frame the selected object. I'm going to select all vertices, press S, then Y to scale them down on this axis. I'm going to select these vertices and move them to the side. Selecting these top vertices again, I'm going to scale them down on the Y-axis. Okay, I'm going to adjust their position slightly to align with the edges. Alright, I'm going to add an edge loop in the center. Now if I press S and scale without selecting an axis, in the front view, you're going to see it doesn't align with the reference. I'm going to go back to the right view, undo with Ctrl Z, press S again, press Y to lock the Y-axis, and scale it up. Now I'm going to go to the front view, press S, choose the X-axis, and adjust the scale. And that's done. Now you can see it matches the reference in both views. Now I'm going to go back to object mode by pressing Tab. With this object selected, I'm going to hold Shift and click on the other object to add it to the selection, press Ctrl L, and choose Copy Modifiers. I'm going to move my cursor over this viewport, press Ctrl Space to expand it. Alright, I'm going to select this object, right click, and enable Shade Smooth. Alright, if I zoom in here, you're going to notice some sharp shading on this part, but we want it to look smooth. So I'm going to press Ctrl Space to exit full screen mode, zoom in on this area, and with this edge loop selected, I'm going to press Ctrl B to activate bevel. Okay, you're going to see this smooths the area, and don't forget to press C to enable clamp, so the vertices don't overlap. I'm going to scroll to add 2 edge loops, then click here to apply. Alright, that's looking great. Just here, the vertices are overlapping, so I'm going to press A, then M, and choose Merge by Distance. To sharpen the lower surface edge, we need to add a supporting edge loop. So I'm going to press Ctrl R and add an edge loop close to this one, like that. We could also add one near the top, but I think it's fine for now. It looks good so far. I'm going to zoom out a bit, press Ctrl Space, and here I'm going to add 3 edge loops in the middle, and 1 more edge loop in the center here. And that's done. I'm going to check all angles of the model to make sure there aren't any issues. Here we can also test different shading options, as I mentioned in previous parts, and ensure your model has no specific issues. Alright, everything seems okay, with no major problems. I'm going to switch the shading back to Studio, enable Cavity, change the type to both, and adjust these properties to 0.5 for now. Alright, that's done. I'm going to exit full screen with Ctrl Space, and now let's start modeling the legs, which might seem a bit tricky. Alright, let's add a cube, press G, and move it around to place it here. Okay, in edit mode, I'm going to scale it down. Let's bring these vertices down, and adjust the position of these top vertices a bit, moving these here, and shifting these slightly to the side. I'm going to pull these vertices over here. Great. Let's add an edge loop in the middle here, move them this way. Then add another edge loop in the middle here, moving these vertices to the left. Selecting these and pulling them to the side, moving these back a bit. I'm going to tweak their positions here. Let me add 1 more edge loop here. Now I'm going to move these vertices over here, trying to roughly match the curve. Okay, let's work on this side too and fine-tune these a bit. All right, now moving to the front view, zooming out a bit. All right, selecting all the vertices. Let's bring them over to this side, adjusting the position a little, then tweaking the placement of the vertices to match the reference. Let's jump to the other side and move these here and there until everything is in place. All right, we're done with this part. Hovering over the viewport, I'm going to press period key to zoom in. Great. The model shape looks good overall. Let's switch to the local view, add a bevel modifier, change the segments to 2, and adjust the amount slightly. Also, I'm going to enable Shade Smooth here. Okay, adding a subdivision surface modifier improves the results, but as you can see, we have some shading issues which changing the amount doesn't fix. If you watched the previous episodes, you will easily guess how we're going to solve this, okay? Simply just switch the limit method to weight. For now, I'm going to turn off subdivision surface to work more easily and enable shade flat to better see the edges. Okay, switching to edit mode, I'm going to start selecting the edges where I want the bevel to affect. Like this. Holding Shift and Alt lets me add to my selection. Great. All set. I'm going to press N to open the side panel. I'm going to set the mean bevel weight to 1 for these selected edges. Okay, I'm going to close the panel with N. And now you can see that the bevel only affects the edges we selected. Okay, I'm going to re-enable subdivision surface. Perfect. I'm going to right click and enable Shade Smooth again. Now we don't have any shading issues and the object looks perfectly smooth. Okay, let's add an edge loop on both sides here. And for even a smoother result, I'm going to set the viewport levels to 2. Just like that, we've modeled this leg with a smooth shading intact. Now we don't have any shading issues and the object looks perfectly smooth. Okay, I'm going to close these, add a mirror modifier, and select this object as the mirror axis. Just make sure the origin is at its center. Simply right-click, choose Set Origin, then Origin to Geometry to center it. All done. Okay, now I'm going to select it and enable the Y-axis in the mirror modifier so it mirrors in all 4 sides. And that's how we modeled the legs for the dresser. Alright, let's move on to modeling the drawers. I'm going to zoom out here and in the front view, I'm going to add a cube. I'm going to reposition it roughly here. Now I'm going to enter edit mode and scale it down. Okay, I'm going to press the period key on the numpad to zoom in. I'm going to select all the vertices and scale it along the x-axis to make it wider. I'm going to adjust the position slightly, moving these vertices to the left and these to the right. Switching to the right view, I'm going to bring these vertices forward to set the position. I'm going to scale them down along the z-axis for better alignment. I'm going to also make sure the front vertices are selected and scale them down without locking any axis. Then I'm going to adjust the position of these 2 vertices. I'm going to select these and move them up a bit. I'm going to also move this one slightly to the left. Great. Now I'm going to press the / key to enter local view. Next, I'm going to select this back face. Press I to insert it a bit. Switch to the right view. Zoom out a little. Press E for extrude and pull it inward. I'm going to add an edge loop in the middle here. Press Ctrl-Shift-R for offset edge slide and click here. Okay, I'm going to add another edge loop down here. I'm going to select these 2 faces and extrude them downwards. Great. Now I'm going to check the mesh to make sure everything is fine. And so far, it looks good. Alright, let's add an edge loop here at the top. And I'm going to add another one down here. Now, let's select the edges that we want beveled. Starting with all the edges we want to stay sharp. I'm going to select these inner edges as well. Now I'm going to select these front edges. Okay. Looks like I didn't select all the inner edges. So I'm going to select them. There we go. Now I'm going to press N and change the mean bevel weight to 1. Okay, I'm going to press N again to close the side panel. Alright, looks like everything's good to go. Now let's add a bevel modifier, set the segments to 2, and change the limit method to weight. Adjust the amount until it looks right. Alright, I'm going to rotate the viewport to get a better view of this corner of the mesh. Now we need to adjust the geometry here, so let's change the mighty router setting to arc under geometry to improve it. I'm going to tweak the amount a bit more, and that looks fine. Now let's return to object mode, right click, and enable shade smooth. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to tweak the bevel amount a bit more. Now if I rotate the view to check the inner corner here, there is still a shading issue. Adding a subdivision surface modifier fixes most of it. Setting the levels viewport to 2 makes it even better, but it's still not perfect. Since this part won't be visible, it's not a big issue, but if needed, we can adjust the bevel modifier's shape under the profile setting to make this shading issue less noticeable. Okay, now the corner looks smoother, and for better visibility, I'm going to disable the cavity in the shading setting. Here, I'm going to scroll to reveal the shading icons. From here, I'm going to turn off the cavity, and now we can see the edges more clearly. Okay, I'm going to turn it back on. Zoom in here, and add an edge loop in the middle. I'm going to increase the scale slightly without selecting any specific axis, and check in perspective view to make sure everything looks correct. Okay, now I'm going to exit local view, and add a mirror modifier. Move it to the top of the stack, and use this object as the mirror axis. And that completes the upper drawers. Okay, let's continue with the lower drawers. Zoom out a bit, and duplicate this drawer with Shift D, and moving it down. I'm going to remove the mirror modifier, go to edit mode, select the middle edge loop, delete it, and temporarily disable the bevel and subdivision surface modifier. In vertex select mode, I'm going to move these vertices to the right, and do the same with these others, shifting them slightly to the right as well. Okay, here you can see that this part of the drawer is slanted due to its stylized design. So if I select these vertices and try to move them in this direction, it doesn't take on the slanted shape I want. The horizontal supportive edge here prevents it, so it's better to delete this horizontal supportive edge. I'm going to select it along with the bottom supportive edge, press X, and choose Dissolve Edges. Alright, now I'm going to select these vertices and move them over here. Great. I'm going to press Tab to return to object mode, and I'm going to duplicate it and move it down here. Okay, I'm going to switch to edit mode, select the bottom vertices, press S, then X, and scale them down. I'm going to repeat this for the top vertices, scaling them down on the X-axis. Okay, I'm going to go back to object mode, duplicate it again, and move it here. Switching to edit mode, I'm going to move these up and scale them down on the X-axis, as well as the top vertices. Okay, now I'm going to enable the modifiers and add an edge loop in the center, one horizontal edge loop here, one here, and one here as well. Alright, I don't think there is any issue. I'm going to go into local view to carefully check all the angles of my mesh to make sure everything is fine. Okay, looks good so far. I'm going to exit local view. Now let's move on to the top drawer. Press Ctrl R, scroll to add 3 edge loops here and 1 here. Alright, I'm going to repeat the same steps for the top drawer. Now I'm going to enable the modifiers for both drawers. Great, that's it for modeling the drawers. Now if I go to the right view, you can see that the drawers need to be rotated to match the dresser's curved surface. For rotation, there is a very important point to keep in mind. Make sure to do all rotations in object mode, not in edit mode. Why? Because, for example, if I select this object, go to edit mode, press A to select all components, and then start rotating it and move it here, and for example select these vertices, press G, then Y, you're going to see I can't adjust the drawer's depth along the desired axis. It doesn't change in the right direction. And if, for example, I want to animate this drawer and move it in object mode to open it, it won't open along the correct axis. Alright, I'm going to undo a few steps. And now if I rotate it in object mode and adjust its position like this, then if I select the back vertices and press G for move and then Y, you're going to see it behaves like before. But if I press Y again, you're going to see it easily moves along the desired axis. Likewise, in object mode, if I press G and Y twice, you're going to see we can move the drawer along the correct axis for animation purpose, for example, right? Very good. Okay, I'm going to undo. Now I'm going to go to this drawer, rotate it in object mode, and adjust its position. Okay, I'm going to select these vertices, press G, then Y and Y again, and move them here. I'm going to repeat the same steps for the next drawer, rotating and positioning it like this. I'm going to select the back vertices and move them slightly in this direction. Okay, the top drawers don't need rotation, so they're fine as they are. And that's it. All the drawers have been rotated correctly. To double check, I'm going to select each drawer, zoom out a bit so you can see, okay? Press G, then Y, and then Y again. Now you're going to see that all these drawers can open and close smoothly along their correct axis. Perfect. I'm going to undo everything to return the drawers to their original position. Now let's move on to modeling the empty space behind the drawers. For more convenience, I first select all these objects and hide them with the H key. Then I select all the drawers, press G and then Y and Y again to move the drawers slightly forward so that I can easily see behind them. Now I select this object and switch to edit mode. And here we need more topology or meshes to create the empty space behind the drawers. So first, let's apply the modifiers. I click here and as you can see, the apply option isn't active here and we need to be in object mode. So I bring the mouse here, press tab to return to object mode. I'm going to come back here and then click on apply. Here I also reduce the levels viewport for the subdivision surface modifier to 1 before applying it. Now if I enable wireframe mode, you're going to see that we have more meshes available to work with. Okay, I'm going to change the viewport to the front here, go to edit mode. I'm going to select these vertices, press X and choose vertices and delete them. Then I come here and add a mirror modifier. So if needed, we only have to work on one side. Now we need to create the edge loops. First, I select this with Alt and click. Then I press G twice to bring it down a bit. Okay, I go a bit lower and select this edge loop. Press GG and move it up. Okay. For this part, I'm going to press Ctrl R to add an edge loop and position it here. I'm going to select this and press G twice to move it down. Okay. I'm going to select this one and move it down as well. And do the same for the others. Bringing them down. Okay. Now I'm going to activate vertex select mode with 1 on the top row of the keyboard. Select these two vertices. I'm going to press GG, move them a bit to this side. Adjust this one. And also shift this one a bit to the right. So in this way, I just press G twice to adjust the positions of these vertices. Alright. I come here and add an edge loop here. Everything looks fine now. I switch to face select mode with 3 on the top row of the keyboard. Select these two faces, then these two, and go to right view. Let me zoom in a bit. Okay. Here I press E to extrude and do it this way. Okay, I'm going to press G to move it down a bit and adjust its position better. I select this drawer and hide it with H. And to solve this shading issue, I'm going to select this mesh, right click and enable shade auto smooth. Alright, that's done. Now I'm going to go to edit mode. I'm going to select these faces. Okay. I'm going to come here, press Alt E, select extrude faces along normals and extrude it this way. I'm going to select this, hide it again and choose this one to go into edit mode. Select the middle face, press X and delete it. Okay, let's move on to the next part. I'm going to select these faces, press Alt E, extrude faces along normals. I come back here, hide it and delete the middle face. Okay, I'm going to do the same for this last drawer. I'm going to delete this middle face as well. And as you can see, we easily created these empty spaces behind the drawers. And now we just need to add a bevel to the edges of the indentations we made. Let me zoom in a bit. I'm going to add a bevel modifier. And as you can see, changing the amount doesn't show much effect. And we need to first select the edges we want to bevel. I start selecting the edges and select all the edges that are present here. Just a reminder, simply you can hold down the Shift key to add to your selection. Okay. And that's done. So I've selected all the edges of this section. Now I'm gonna press N and change the mean bevel weight for these edges to 1. Okay, I press N again to close the side panel. Then I come here and change the limit method to weight, and you can immediately see the effect of the bevel. Okay, I'm gonna reduce the amount, change the miter router from this geometry section to arc. Okay, I'm gonna hold Alt and middle click here, zoom in a bit, and change the segments for the bevel to 3. Okay. I adjust the amount a bit, and you see that we have a shading problem here. If I zoom out a bit, you can see that this issue is noticeable almost at all corners, and to fix this, we need more geometry. So I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier here, and immediately you can see that the result has improved significantly. I can also change the levels viewport to 2 for an even better result. Okay, if you zoom in a lot and look closely, you're going to see that the problem hasn't been completely resolved. If you'd like, you can adjust the bevel amount to get closer to your desired result and minimize this shading issue. Notice that increasing the segments here actually makes the shading problem worse. So keep it set to 3 works best, I think. Alright, I'm going to adjust the amount again. And since this part of the model isn't heavily in view of the camera, we don't need to work more on it. Of course, this issue can be resolved, but it requires knowing more advanced modeling techniques, which we will skip for now since this is a beginner course. Okay, I zoom out a bit, and from this angle, you can see that this problem isn't noticeable at all. So there's no issue. Alright, finally, I press Alt-H to unhide the objects. And yes, this is the modeling of the dresser. Okay, I select these drawers, then come here, press G, and then Y and Y again to move the drawers and bring them back to their places. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it useful. Don't forget to join our free Discord group, and if you have any questions, be sure to ask them there. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next episode.